It is Wednesday, my dudes, which means it's time for another First Thoughts and Initial Impressions Epic 7 video. This one will be on Successor Taeyou, the newest Moonlight 5-star that was just shown earlier this morning over on YouTube. As with all of my impressions videos, I'll give you my 2 cents on the character. Do I think they're good? Where would I play them? What types of equipment and artifacts would I play them on? All those sorts of things you've come to expect from me in an impressions video. Anyways, let's not waste any more time and take a look at Successor Taeyou's S3 animation.
Do you doubt my skills too? Come, let me teach you your place. I never thought I'd end up using it here. That desperate to bleed?
You know, for how simple that animation is, I really like it, right? It's essentially just boils down to a guy pulling out a sword and looking menacingly at you, but it works. I think it's a lot better than the other S3 animations we've had over the last 2 months or so. So, you know what? I'm here for it. Moving on to Successor Taeyou's stats, he is a light warrior of the Libra zodiac symbol. This is the most common stat line for the warrior class in Epic 7. He shares a stat line with Hua Young, Holiday Euphine, Luna, Rimuru, Lilibet, and Little Queen Charlotte. Take a closer look at his stats. He has 1,119 attack, 627 defense, 6,266 health, 109 base speed, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, and no starting effectiveness or effect resistance. His imprint is attack percentage for the team, and his self-imprint is attack percentage. Overall, it's a Libra warrior. It's the most average stat line for a warrior in the game. Everything is painfully average, right? You have average health, defense, attack, and speed, which is why I have a bone to pick with the actual video for Successor Taeyou, the one that revealed him, because it says he has high health and high attack. I get it. You have to say something to get your audience excited rather than just say, hey man, he's painfully average. But don't let this fool you, right? There are multiple warriors that have over 1,000 HP more than Taeyou. I would consider that high health. And in case you're wondering, Libra Warrior has the 5th highest attack stat amongst warriors. So yeah, there's no way that's high attack either. Anyways, just a little bit of a nitpick. Let's move on to the actual character skills now. As always, let's read through everything once together so that way we're all on the same page before we analyze the character. Starting with Taeyou's skill 2 passive, Spirit Invocation. Starts the first battle with 40 to 60 fighting spirit depending on Malagora. When combat readiness of an enemy is decreased, gains fighting spirit equal to the amount of combat readiness reduced. And when fighting spirit is full at the end of a turn, consumes all fighting spirit, increasing combat readiness of Taeyou by 100% and granting him possession for 2 turns. In case you forgot, possession is an undispellable buff that gives the user plus 25% attack, and also whenever they are hit with a critical hit, they counter with their basic attack skill. That's very important to remember for the builds that we're going to try and play on this character, and also, of course, how strong the basic attack is. Moving on to his skill 3, it is Azure Phantom. It is a non-attack skill, and you acquire 3 souls upon use, and it has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on Malagora. Unleashes power, dispelling 2 buffs from all enemies, and has a 60 to 85% chance depending on Malagora to decrease defense for 2 turns before granting invincibility to Taeyou for 1 turn. When Taeyou is granted possession, extends buff durations of the caster by 1 turn and grants him an extra turn. Soulburn effect for the cost of 20 souls, ignores effect resistance. And finally, we have Taeyou's basic attack skill, Lon Na Ja, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Attacks the enemy with a spear, decreasing combat readiness by 20%. A successful attack always results in a critical hit. When the skill is used, if it was not triggered by a dual attack and Taeyou is granted possession, activates Roaring Spirit Fall instead. Roaring Spirit Fall increases the attack of Taeyou for 2 turns before attacking the enemy by striking from above. A successful attack always results in a critical hit, and this skill does not trigger a dual attack. Anyways, now that we know the kit, let's talk about the character. In a nutshell, Successor Taeyou is a powerful bridge for any player that wants to be the aggressor in PvP. When using him, priority 1 should be to try to get him into possession stance as quickly as possible. Luckily, a lot of your standard openers easily accomplish this, such as Zio with his 40% combat readiness reduction, Eligos with his 50% combat readiness reduction, and of course, C. Phantom Politis with her total 80% enemy team combat readiness reduction. Sorry, Conqueror Lace isn't really going to cut it with the 25% CR pushback that she has. So yeah, I wouldn't really recommend her. Take a look at who you're trying to play him with, see if they have over 40% total in their opening skill. There's also a fair amount of aggro-centric characters that you could play with him that aren't necessarily openers. Requiem Rowana obviously comes to mind, but a character like Wanderer Silk is also one to consider, especially since she has such a valuable speed imprint. Pirate Captain Flan is another one that I found really fun to play so far this season, and I think she could also reliably enable Taeyou. The point is, you have a lot of options with this character, so get creative with your team compositions. After triggering possession, use Azure Phantom to remove buffs from the enemy team and set up a team-wide defense break. With your extra turn, ideally you'll use his enhanced basic attack skill to pick off one key target on the enemy team, then chill inside his invincibility for one turn. Once your turn comes back around, you hopefully get to do it again. I want to point out, by the way, that possession is pretty legit on this character, especially with the buff extension from the skill 3. This means if your opponent fires off an AoE attack, Taeyou will swoop in for a big damage counter. It'll also stick around for a whole turn cycle after he loses invincibility, meaning that if you want to focus fire him off the board, you're gonna probably take a huge amount of damage if you don't one-shot him, or you don't use a specialized DPS to do so. Remember, possession counters any critical hit, so you need to use non-critical striking DPS in order to not trigger the counter. It's very reminiscent of Spirit Eye Celine, the other hero that uses the possession stance, only this character design I feel like is a lot better and a lot less toxic than hers is. Taeyou also feels like he's a lot more reliable of an aggro cleave setup in the current format than somebody like Ran or Briar Witch Assaria, right? These are all attack-based strips which invite all kinds of issues. This character having a non-attack skill strip with a defense break is super ideal, as there's a lot less passives you'll trigger with this move. While a non-attack skill AoE defense break is essentially next level power creep in Epic 7, somehow I'm kind of okay with this. The non-attack skill nature is actually healthier for game design, as before, the attack-based defense breaks triggered all sorts of passives and RNG BS that no one really liked playing against. This skill though, it just gets counterplayed by Green Celine or Red Politis, and that's kind of it. Pretty predictable, but still able to be countered by common units that most of the player base has. I'm okay with that. I actually kind of prefer that. So anyway, the non-attack skill punishes obviously hurt Taeyou a lot, but he also has a few other drawbacks I want to point out. He needs to be used aggressively to get value out of the character. If you're not the aggressor in the matchup and you can't get possession right off the bat, the character feels like he's probably pretty bad, which will limit where you can use him and which type of player can actually use him well. Him being a unit that requires you to be the aggressor in a matchup and also light means that Bystander Hua-Young is probably going to be a pretty big roadblock for someone like him. But aside from those gripes, I think he's actually a really good tool to have in your kit if you're someone that likes to play aggro or cleave. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he's the new meta setup character for those types of playstyles. As for how I'd build him, you actually have a pretty decent chunk of freedom due to his passive as well as the pseudo passive on his basic attack skill. Since he always gives 100% combat readiness from his passive whenever you trigger possession, you don't really need a lot of speed on him if your goal is to just cleave with him, right? If all you're trying to do is just strip buffs, defense break, and go for one kill, that's it. You don't really need a lot of speed. Just go destruction set with your choice of offset, build all the damage you want, and blow people up. If you want something that's a bit more balanced, something that has a little bit more of a safety net and you actually still value the speed, then yeah, speed set seems like it could work, although I don't think it will be as efficient or as sought after as just going all damage on destruction set. The other thing I want to point out is how, since you will always land a critical strike, that's going to translate to a huge chunk of free stats for the character. Traditionally, the lifesteal set has been very difficult to build on heroes since it doesn't give bonus stats. But I think there's something to be said about trying lifesteal on Successor Taeyou and using him as not just a bridge, but a potential anchor. If the damage numbers are really insane on his enhanced basic attack skill, you could heal up a lot of damage from your counter whenever you're hit. This makes it nearly impossible for opponents to climb back into a game since they can't kill a Bruiser Taeyou that's out sustaining them. Building a lot of HP to survive hits and heal back up, that's definitely something I would want to try. As for artifacts, I think Pure White Trust is one of the ones that interests me the most. With the changes that it got a while back, it doubles as an ancient book for your cleave players and also amps up his damage with that critical hit damage buff. If you want a sachet style damage artifact though to keep your foot on the gas, Merciless Glutton seems like it would be a pretty good option on the character. And as for that sustain route, I think Pipette Lance and Sigurd Scythe are also worth a look at. Again, sustain counter Taeyou, much like Lifesteal Spirit Eye Celine, is something that I think is very much on the table. At the end of the day, if you are somebody that likes to play very aggressively, I think Successor Taeyou is worth the pull. For my turn 2 brothers and sisters out there though, you might feel like this character will leave you wanting and you might not really get a lot of value out of them. But at the end of the day, those are just my thoughts on the character. So now I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Successor Taeyou? Let me know down in the comment section below. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Later now.